thanks for giving me the hardest question first, Bridget. But no, look, the Uluru Statement from the Heart, I think, is really one in a long line, but probably the most important since Federation. Statements from First Nations peoples about what role they want to play in Australia's democracy, and what form of recognition, we want within the framework of the state. We were excluded from those decisions in 1901, or at least the 1890s, and the drafting of the Constitution leading up to 1901, when our Constitution did come into force. We all know that Australia didn't enter into any kind of peace treaty at the outset in terms of the initial invasion and dispossession. We had a referendum in 1967 that corrected our exclusion, but it didn't empower us in any way. It didn't lead to the recognition of any particular right. And so here we are in 2021, still one of the few liberal democracies in the world with no form of constitutional recognition of First Nations people. So the Uluru Statement from the Heart is we call it an invitation, but primarily it's a law reform proposal. It is a proposal from a number of First Nations people who participated in a very complex constitutional process over the past 11 years. And then ultimately from 2015 to 2017, very serious contemplation of what constitutional reform might look like. And that culminated with Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people saying at Uluru in 2017, look, this is a really complex proposal, one that politicians, given the nature of Australian retail politics, are likely to not want to implement. And so the only way you get substantive reform in this country is to do it with the approval of all Australians. And so that is what the Uluru Statement from the Heart is. It's an invitation for all Australians to help us do what should have been done 1788, 1890s, 1901, 1967. We still haven't done it as a nation. And so really the Uluru Statement from the Heart is speaking to the unfinished business of the country.
It's interesting, you used the word community before, and in this era where, as you mentioned it earlier, that we're living alone, a lot of us are, we're in isolation presently. I'm in New South Wales, so, and in Melbourne and other places around Australia, we're in lockdown. We're lonelier in some ways more than we ever were before. We're communicating online. Hi guys, it's nice to see you. It's a strange thing. So we're less likely to see people's faces. We look in people's eyes, but we've always got a mask on. So connection is a kind of a funny thing. What is it about these different pockets of faith or belief that in some ways we can, we might look at it with a bit of skepticism, but the fact is there are moments there where people can actually join and have those conversations together amongst their community, where before they may have been on their own entirely. I wondered if we could talk a little bit about that. I mean, Sarah, maybe that's something that you sort of discovered through the process, is that, this is a moment where people, regardless of what you believe, you can find someone else like you who you can connect with.
Yeah, I mean, the stories in each of the stories in this book, there's another story about groups and group behavior, and big and small interactions. I hadn't, spirituality is one of those words that you know what it means, but then when you're called to actually define it and articulate a definition, it suddenly eludes you. And then
go to the dictionary online.
Well, exactly. And it's like, there's so many words like that. And when you start looking at the concept and how it's applied and how it's understood, it's really about connecting to something or someone outside of yourself. So it can be, the collective of humans on Earth, or it could be, any range of things. But it is, this idea that you are not just this atomized being, but you have this connection to something greater. So then the stories told in these, groups, many of which I was quite jealous of, because they had certainty and they had communal support. they had approval and a very clear path towards, there was one way of doing many things that, we kind of drown in choice and discernment by ourselves. So, in that sense, there's nothing there to mock. There's, it's a very normal, natural human impulse. I think the question, that we need to then ask is, looking at ourselves in our beliefs, like, are these just the stories that we can tolerate? Are we there because they make us feel better? Are they big enough to kind of encapsulate a range of human experiences? Or are we using them to justify our own impulses towards blaming or anger, or, to escape our own failures or fears? So, that's a separate question. But just looking at, spirituality itself, it serves such a beautiful function. And, if we can't find it in healthy ways, or, inclusive ways, then we will go towards this very tribal, exclusive place, which causes, as we see now, as has been true through all of human history, a great deal of damage.
Most of the time, I like to find a table right at the back, close to a wall, where we can see everything. Then people can't come up behind us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and at work, what I've found is where I'm situated in my desk is there's a wall, so I can see everything outbound and not wonder what's coming behind me. So I think deaf space is really critical. I think there's two types of deaf people that will be having a conversation with each other, right? They're signing and they're looking at each other and they're walking.
Mm.
What happens when there's a pole coming towards you? Will that deaf person bump into the pole? That natural intuition that we have is to help each other as deaf people. And we manipulate the surroundings by doing so. That's deaf space. It's in there. It's intuitive. We would then move and avoid certain objects, and we support each other. And it's a two-way street. And that's what I mean when we talk to deaf space. It's powerful, so intriguing. It's a different way of responding to our needs, I believe, in terms of embodiment of deafness and our communication. Work, I have meetings in the mornings because when it comes to lip reading and then Zoom meetings and even sign language, by the time midday comes, afternoon comes, fatigue sets in. That lip reading, the eyes are strained, we're exhausted. That deaf embodiment, definitely.